we want to welcome you on a journey we are undertaking. A journey, a bit like a pilgrimage, where within and without are intertwined. A trip challenging the limits of our known world. Dimethyltryptamine, psilocybin and bufotenine, more commonly known under the names of DMT, ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, the spirit molecule, and even the toad venom. The DMT-based substances, also understood as psychedelics or entheogens, are the subject of our research and the topic of our journey. Today, many people, and amongst them celebrities and political figures, testify that it changed their life literally, that they went through an inner experience of death of the ego, a deep healing, or that an unprecedented spiritual awakening happened to them after taking it. Many healers and New Age communities and movements influenced by shamanism speak about it as a sacred medicine, as a tool to elevate us spiritually, as a teacher that enhances our collective consciousness. Something that without any doubt reminds us of ancient mystery school practices and rituals from ancient Greece, Egypt, and India. A substance that was previously reserved for a spiritual elite alone, or very specific rituals and specific spiritual practices. Yet it is now available for anyone courageous enough to go on a trip where you may experience a massive ego death and your soul travel through different realms and dimensions, meeting entities and observing sacred geometry and encountering extra-dimensional beings. Neuroscience, too, seems to have put a grasp on it, and many official researches have been done by very well-known and respected universities all around the world. Some doctors and psychiatrists have already testified to its health benefit. If this appears reasonably new for the Western world, and at first sight absent from our monotheistic religions, is it really the case? Is the rise of DMT's presence today in our human society and spirituality simply an adaptation of religion for the 21st century? Like a New Age fusion between modern and ancient, between exotic drug and too dogmatic religion? Or have DMT-based substances always been part of religion? Have the nature and the virtue of DMT and its role in religion been kept as a forbidden secret by the rulers and the scholars of our very own religious institutions?
Participants were given 2 doses of psilocybin.
And in other news, DMT, a recreational psychedelic drug, is the subject of a study
suggesting it stimulates new connections.
Now, to end tonight, an international study has shown that a hallucinogenic drug, which is found in magic mushrooms.
Awaken Life Sciences plans to transform mental health care and believe combining psychedelics with psychotherapy is the next evolution in psychiatry.
Now, DMT is trendy today, scientifically, therapeutically, politically, spiritually, and the attention given to it in so many different fields attracted our interest. So is it an intoxicant, a drug, a medicine, a teacher, a spirit molecule, a vehicle, a portal to other dimensions, and maybe even to God himself? Is it one of the above, some of them, or even all of the above? So what is DMT exactly? Now, after gathering a decent amount of information from so many different fields as possible, we felt the need to meet people that have experienced it, that have studied it, and that teach about it today. continue our journey now, heading to the Medicine Festival. Now, this seems quite a pioneering event with over 6,000 people gathered, many people who claim to be pioneers in the DMT experience, as well as those who will be there experiencing all of this together. So we hope to find and experience what is actually truly happening with this medicine festival. So we arrived late to the festival, and because of that we didn't expect to meet with particular people this evening. However, despite that, we were able to wander into what seemed to be an artist curator's cove, and we found some amazing pictures on the wall depicting sacred figures like Buddha and Jesus and Krishna, and managed then to engage with the artist, who discussed how a lot of this had been induced through DMT meditations, and how it was connected to the drink and the medicine. I'm with Bruce Parry, obviously fame of Amazon and Tribe and Arctic and various productions, spotlighted in the BBC. How did it feel to go into this world, and how can you explain it from a material plane, this psychological, spiritual world?
Well, you can't from that space, in a sense. They're powerful tools, and as with all powerful tools, fire can be used to cook your food, or it can be used to burn your house down.
Yeah.
Right? So unless we understand how to use it, it can be problematic. And I think that is the same, especially so for most plant medicines. And so, yeah, without doubt, they have been some of the most healing, transformative tools, medicines of my life. That doesn't mean to say that it's a panacea, and it doesn't mean to say that everyone should therefore go and do it. It's like I've had the privilege of being able to do it in the right setting with people who know what they're doing, who can hold space, and if I have a problem, they can deal with that, and then also with people who can help me integrate that into my life thereafter. To just go and do it on your own in a city without anyone and no idea of what to do, that isn't the right way to do it. No. So it's not. So it's the tool, but the tool needs to be used
in the right fashion.
Right way. And I'm a huge believer in these plant medicines. I think they're necessary, they're vital, they're beautiful, and they have a very strong part in what's needed for us as a species to reconnect. Mostly what I'm seeing the plant medicines do is 2 or 3 things. Firstly is allowing us to reconnect with the natural world in a way that it's hard to explain, but you get a sense of reconnection to that which is beyond somehow. There's a spiritual element to it, which a lot of people get. But the much more important thing is you can often get an opportunity to heal some stuck trauma, past childhood traumas that have been affecting our behavior in a way that we don't even understand. And taking these medicines allow you a short window of seeing that so that you can make life changes. When we can actually be at peace with ourselves because we've managed to get some of this stuff out, then we have a great opportunity of feeling this connection that we so desperately need.
And taking the right steps to move forward.
All of that.
So we come out of this very friendly and dynamic interview with Bruce Parry, with his overall idea that DMT and plant medicine are genuine and powerful healing tools for humanity, as as individuals and even as a collective, as long as they are dealt with in a responsible way. He further clarified that if all these substances influence the pathways of the mind in a different manner, DMT itself has a specific way to interact with our brains. DMT and the brain. This is exactly what we want to know more about. And God being the best of planners, it is no surprise that our next guest is indeed Chris Timmermann, a PhD neuroscientist and researcher at Imperial College London. After his lecture, we met up with him to learn more in detail about the study he is leading, the first ever to observe and track brain activity before, during, and after the DMT experience in so much detail.
So right now we're extending that DMT state so that we can have a better form of exploration of what's going on in these states at an experiential level, also at a neuroscientific level. So extending that DMT trip to 30 minutes at least. So we use something in which we try to incorporate experience and the value of experience into scientific research. So, and the way that we do that is that we do what we call microphenomenology, which is a way of interviewing individuals in a very detailed fashion about their experiences. And then we connect that to the brain data. And it seems as if the brain on the one end appears to be switching into a dream state of sorts. That's what's happening in DMT trip. And in our later work, which we use fMRI and EEG and other sort of imaging methods, this engagement, this hyperconnectivity of the evolved brain systems, the brain systems that have to do with imagination, decision making, the way that we construct stories and build worlds of experience, they become engaged and those parts of the brain become hyperconnected with the rest of the brain. That's what essentially was done. We see that the communication patterns become more fluid under DMT and more dynamic, more changing. And then the other thing that we're doing a lot now, we're starting is a 5-MeO DMT experiment, very similar to what we did with NMDMT, but this time with this substance that, instead of inducing these experiences of alternate realms or realities, induces this massive ego death experience. So we're interested in honing into that and how that can inform us on our understanding of different consciousness.
Chris also explained to us further that the research showed unrelated people met the same types of entities or archetypes under the influence of DMT. We asked Chris if, in the study, they were able to see if DMT activates in the brain areas that we would recognize as responsible for collective consciousness or an awareness transcending the individual identity.
Well, I don't know. This is something that, this is a broader statement, the idea that these experiences can, allow us to have some form of collective consciousness. But in terms of a great awakening, that's a different thing altogether. And it could be that DMT can be helpful for many people to become aware of many aspects of their own life, social life and nature and so on. But for many individuals, also DMT is a gateway into just their own little rabbit holes and, ways of understanding reality, and it can become a solipsistic kind of event as well. So whether or not it opens you up or it closes you down, I think it's an open question.
We finally asked Chris what was his expectation or ambition with his research.
My ambition really is to, that in science we focus again on the value of human experience and the understanding that we have of human experience and human consciousness, and how that might enable us to eventually live better lives, have a better understanding of ourselves and the world.
Thanks to Chris, we now know a little bit better what is the current scientific understanding of DMT and how it affects the brain. We were able to grasp how the molecule can induce a dreamlike state, which interestingly many spiritual masters perceive to be a more real version of our world, that we actually awaken when we go to sleep. Remarkably, the areas of the brain associated with our imagination decision-making, and how we construct stories and build our worlds of experience are specifically stimulated under the influence of DMT. Neuroimaging shows hyperconnectivity and plasticity of the brain increase in tandem. DMT can produce intense and immersive altered states of consciousness, with the experience characterized by vivid and bizarre visions, a sense of visiting alternative realities or dimensions, and similarities with near-death experiences. So DMT seems clearly connected to a rising in our awareness, either about ourselves or the world around us, or even worlds around us, and the nature of the human mind and consciousness. It is generally presented and thought to be an intoxicant, and therefore a dangerous drug by government, media moguls, and virtually all the mainstream religious institutions. But is DMT rather actually an agent of change and an ally on the path of humanity towards its betterment and very own evolution? These discoveries in science go hand in hand with the increase in therapists in Europe and the United States integrating the use of DMT-based substances in their healing sessions. Now, this is exactly what Stefana Bosse, co-director of the Psychedelic Society, and Jennifer Tesla, a qualified psychotherapist, do in their psilocybin-assisted retreats they organize and run together in the Netherlands. We asked them to share with us their understanding of psilocybin and DMT-based substances in therapeutic usage in a retreat context.
What I see from running the retreats is that there is that potential working with these medicines for people to open to a kind of dimension of life that feels vaster or deeper and potentially more spiritual. I guess maybe the kind of one of the key points is that it helps people look inside. And so whatever they're bringing in terms of issues or blocks or questions, it's a way for them to really turn the mind inwards and look at these questions, look at these issues, and begin finding the answers within themselves. With psilocybin, experiencing the kind of interconnectedness of life or having these experiences of opening and compassion and love, it certainly can orient people towards greater kindness, compassion, having more kind of aligned lives, making different choices. So yeah, certainly.
A lot of the kindness, the goodness has come also very much from the context. Like a lot of indigenous cultures, you know, it's very embedded in a whole ecology and a cosmology of interconnectedness, of reciprocity.
Both of these facilitators went on to emphasize the role of the context, the communal aspect, and the togetherness of the experience. Another very important point for them was the preparation before the taking of the DMT or psilocybin, and the importance of the work done in accompanying these people, integrating the experience into their own life and journey after being on the retreat. This is something that professor in psychiatry and writer Rick Strassman, a luminary pioneer in the field, points towards in his famous book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Listening to them, we felt that as therapists, they have almost the role of modern-day priestesses. And we asked them how they linked DMT, spirituality, and religion together.
It certainly gives people a first-hand, you know, personal, kind of visceral experience of potentially kind of spiritual aspects of life in a way that organized kind of religion doesn't always do. Yeah, it's a much more direct kind of spiritual or mystical connection that can open up.
When people come to our retreats or when I experience people in ayahuasca ceremonies, it's not just the high, the peak experience of the psychedelic that touches people so deeply and that they crave. It's the feeling of being together with a group of people, of doing something that matters, of collectively looking at our stuff, of celebrating the magic of life, of praying, of being connected to something greater. And in many ways it takes the place of what maybe some time ago used to be church.
It's clearly a fact, because the church and religion have now been torn apart and corrupted, and are failing today to feed the spirituality of believers in God. Instead, humanity has been clearly turning towards wild and adrenaline-filled personal travel escapades. Science, exotic gurus, psychotherapy or shamanism to fill the undeniable void. Shamanism has become more and more trendy and plays a great role in introducing the DMT molecule to the West. To end our busy day, we have an interview with Rita, who is one of the major young female representatives and communicators of the Huni Kuin people. She promotes the culture and spirituality of the community through the arts. If we know that generally for the natives of the Amazon, DMT is not only a molecule, but is actually a force that the plant of ayahuasca contains, we are curious to know how the Huni Kuin, the tribe she represents, understand and for what purpose they use it.
E para nós, o Neshpan é uma bebida que é o nosso próprio professor, onde nós aprendemos, né, a nos conectar com a força da natureza. Através dessa força chamada miração, né? Essa força que muitas vezes as pessoas tentam traduzir, mas que ela, para nós, não tem tradução. Você só pode sentir. É simplesmente miração.
Rita further explained to us that the use of the plant must be done in the traditional way. The way that has been kept from generation to generation for thousands of years and administered by someone who knows it very well, of course, a shaman. And they can prescribe when to use it, at which dose, and who to give it to or not.
Sim, porque não é só apenas a medicina. Depois tem que tomar banho, tem as outras medicinas que é a mistura. Tem que entender a linguagem da medicina, né? Que muitas vezes é chegada de uma forma errada e faz as pessoas enxergar, né? Com uma coisa ruim, e não é isso, né? Porque se fosse uma coisa ruim, a gente não teria essa conexão. Então, por isso que muitas vezes você tem que saber se informar, ter o conhecimento daquilo que não faz parte da sua cultura, né? Buscar da própria pessoa, né? Dos próprios donos que sabem melhor a explicação sobre aquela história, né? Aquela medicina, para depois saber repassar para os outros. Eu não posso falar pela experiência dos outros. Muitas vezes as pessoas tentam procurar muitas palavras, onde outras conseguem enxergar de uma outra forma, né? Então, nós, povos Huni somos um povo coletivo, e a nossa intenção de utilizar, de beber essa medicina, é sempre pensando em trabalhos coletivos, né? Nessa intenção de unir a força, não uma força individual, mas cada um tem a sua experiência, né? E a experiência do povo Huni é sempre essa experiência de coletividade.
It was truly a surreal feeling to have in front of us a representative of this great tradition, kept secret and only open to the tribe of the Amazon for thousands of years previously. We were grateful for the time given to us by Rita in sharing the wisdom of the ancients about the spirit molecule, or mirasan. Now this first day draws to a close, and we feel very blessed to have had so many rich encounters from such diverse perspectives. It was truly beyond our own expectations. The day was full, and we'd enjoyed the goodwill environment and all the discussions. We felt happy to rest too, and welcome in our very own dreamscapes of the event. Tomorrow we would have another loaded program, and would start with a specialist in ancient Greek mystery schools. We wake up early the next day, and on reflection, we really feel like we are in a bubble, in another dimension, with all these people dressing up and acting so differently than our regular lives. An air of Woodstock prevails more wisely. A temporary bubble, we thought, that would explode tonight when the festival ended, like a short-lived utopia. The question remains, will it ripple out and bear fruit to the world, or was it merely an escapist or short-lived dream for the experiencers? For us, it is now becoming crystal clear we have collected precious insights and knowledge extremely beneficial to our project and a portal to a greater understanding of the reality of the DMT molecule. A mysterious and magical journey too for us. A process and in some way an initiation into this kaleidoscopic world. Now, speaking about initiation, this is indeed the context that we understood kykeon, a beverage synthesized in ancient Greece. Indeed, in the mystery schools, the chosen few were initiated into ingesting this drink, barley with ergot, otherwise known as the elixir of kykeon, which could induce hallucinations. It was clear from the initiates that what they were undertaking was a journey to reveal the spark of God within. Wandering through the dark terrors, shivering, trembling, after this a strange and wondrous light, voices and the majesty of holy sounds and sacred visions, light that moves to meet you, pure meadows that receive you, songs and dances and holy apparitions. So our next interview is with Apostolia Papadamiki, a specialist in ancient Greek mysteries, and we are very curious to know more about DMT and psychedelics in ancient Greece and the mystery school.
Yeah, first of all, the ancient Greek mysteries. The mysterion means the unrevealed, unspeakable, hidden secret. So, how can it be a mystery if we all know about it? So the reason why they had initiations and why not everybody could enter was to keep it a mystery. I find this very fair. That's one thing. The second, it was a collective experience. It was not an individual experience. And there we come to the now. Now we're separated. We're all looking for a very strong personal experience. No, I think we should look for a very strong collective experience where we lose our ego. And always the question that for me clarifies my intention is why I'm doing that. Why I'm doing a ceremony, why I'm doing a performance, why I'm doing a prayer. Do I want to give? Do I want to repeat or take? It's about a long-term process of purification to begin with. So the initiates to the Eleusinian mysteries, they had to remain silent for 5 years about what they were experiencing during the mysteries. 5 years is a very long time to remain silent and speak about nothing. Then they had to prepare themselves to make a pilgrimage of 30 kilometers, passing from 11 different temples, make their offerings, make their prayers. They had to fast. They had to fast from food and they had to fast from water. And then while, let's say, entering the Eleusinian mysteries, it was 9 days of ceremonies, days and nights. And the ceremonies were during the nights. So depending on the level of initiations, there were different levels of initiation. Maybe at the last stage, you could enter the telesterion, the most secret, highest level ceremonial space. And then, out of coming of all this process, pilgrimage, the walking, the fasting, getting the first 8 nights, you would, after passing through different physical experience, drink the kionans, the kion. That would be additional tool, let's say, to be able to open the gates of perception and creating different experiences so they can bring you into a near-death experience. That was the Eleusinian mysteries. They had to bring you into a near-death, really to provoke your fears, your greatest fears. And then when you would go back home, let's say you would be purified from the fear of death. And that was the only thing that they wanted. They wanted that the human beings understand that when they're purified from the fear of death, then maybe there's not going to be another incarnation and drama in this life.
So now we dive deep into the world of ancient Greece, brought forth to this moment thanks to our guests, to confirm that DMT-based substances were an integral part of the initiation to enable the people to die before they die, a death to the ego and an ally in the process to be reborn again, a tool to break through, to open our perception, to lift the veil and become more selfless and beneficial to our society as a whole. So did the prophets, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle partake in such rituals? Was it part of their own connection with God and their guidance and support in prophethood? Now that is what is insinuated in many texts, especially as they attended mystery schools themselves. Through these initiations, Plato was able to perceive the nature of our reality and divorce himself from the attachments of this world, to truly die before we die. Is it any wonder that after this, Plato wrote in Phaedo, On the Soul, describing the forms and shapes that were behind the fabrication of our matrix world, beyond space and time. He saw the blessed sight and vision, and was initiated into that which is rightly called the most blessed of mysteries, a sight of perfect and happy apparitions, which we saw in the pure light, being ourselves pure and not entombed in this body, in which we are imprisoned like an oyster in its shell. Aristotle said of those descending on Eleusis, it was to experience something, not to learn something. Why else did the pilgrims who went there earn the honorary title of Poptes, the ones who had seen it all, otherwise after such an encounter? Now, some say that Druidism is linked to ancient Greece, and maybe more precisely to Pythagoras, who was rumoured to have visited the British Isles and spread his divine wisdom. Whether true or not, we are interested to hear the Druidic perspectives on DMT and substances inducing inspiration, trance, or prophecy. Chris Park, a Druidic priest, was happy to share his profound wisdom with us.
So the main source of inspiration and intoxication in the Druid tradition, from a substance point of view, was a mead or a metheglin, a brew of spring water and honey and herbs. And various different herbs would go in for different reasons. Some astringent, some euphoric, some entheogenic.
Which means like connection to the divine, doesn't it? In ancient Greek.
Yeah. It would encourage the gods within, and so the inspiration literally means to be full of spirit, and enthusiasm means to be full of God and goddess and deity. There's a potsherd from Scotland, proto-Celtic, way back in the Neolithic era, that contained a kind of honeyed brew, but also some malted grain, but two very strong herbs, meadowsweet and henbane. And today, aspirin comes from meadowsweet, and henbane is an anesthetic. But in small doses, it's a herb of prophecy, and it's used in witches' flying ointment. And it encourages prophetic thought and vision, and that link to the spirit realm. It doesn't contain DMT, it's more of a nerve toxin it contains, but it's not a psychedelic in the sense, but it's mixed with I've recreated the brew and mixed with mellow sweet and homemade together in the right dosage. It's a really euphoric, golden, light opening, shining brew, with the medicine of the honey as well, and the honey bees and all the different herbs thereon, and the spring water and the pollen richness. You could enter into that state of trance and vision and meditation very easily. So there's discipline, there's law to go with it, and dosage and health.
So I'm quite intrigued, just to go back to that point where you said they had this kind of sacred opening. It almost sounds like the pineal gland was...
Exactly that, yeah. So the awen, which is what the bardic... the bard seeks to awen, this flowing source of inspiration, this omniscience that in those rare moments of epiphany comes flowing through, and you become like a channel for this limitless potential that's behind everything. Psychedelics isn't a necessary, I should say, that we can do the work, we can get to those states of being, those places of trance, of prophecy and omniscience and connectedness through a practice, through meditation. And psychedelics can heal, and are medicines, and can heal us when we're in places of trauma or we need something unlocking, perhaps. But it can be a prophylactic tactic also, to keep us connected. But so there are many ways to connect, and it's on trend at the moment, isn't it? Sort of psychedelics. And my path is, part of my druidic path is beekeeping and the making of mead. So part of that I've branched into the ancient sort of more psychedelic brews and entheogenic brews using stronger herbs and medicines.
JJ, likewise of the Druidic Order and friend of Chris, was also willing to share some complimentary words after Chris had finished. We were delighted to hear from this friendly and wise man who revealed Druidic knowledge connected to spiritual wisdom, transcending space and time.
I'm able to go to those places without the substance. Now that's an accident of fate, perhaps. My mother may have given me a shamanic initiation as a child. Going back to your topic, DMT, I've taken ayahuasca once because I was curious, and all it did was confirm that in a different way, those places are accessible, maybe not quite in the same sort of supreme colours that I experienced there, but in terms of that mystical place, for whatever reason, that's been very close to my being since I was a child. No, it's if it's used consciously and wisely and with respect and honour. And there's definitely that exists, but there's also a whole movement that is on a fun trip. Intention's really important. The potential, the potency of that potential in DMT. It can definitely be utilised for the good of beings. If you're going to DMT just to have a fun time, I don't think it will work for you. It needs to be, in my humble estimation, and in reverence, and come to it with reverence, and be prepared for a bit of mirth. Koshin yatar endo enta, 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 koshin yatar endo enta. But the beauty of that is if you go on for minutes, we haven't got the time and it's not the right place, but when you do that for a long time, go into a different, you can even in a short time, those words mean as we unite, so the worlds unite. And coming right back to your source DMT question, as we unite, so the worlds unite. I think DMT is a vehicle and a gateway for enabling that, but it has to be used sensitively and responsibly. Yeah?
These wise words are the last testimony captured from the Medicine Festival, and we find that they summarize and synchronize well with our overall understanding of the spirit molecule. Intention is the key platform to commence with an experience, to be prepared to let go of our own understanding and permit the divine outpouring to saturate us completely so we can dissolve to ourselves and be immersed in the full essence of God. And in doing so, return to the primordial world as more emboldened human beings, willing to put the other before the self, no matter what challenges we might face, for the betterment of the community, to become like bees in a hive.
So we are now leaving the Medicine Festival, and it's been truly an eye-opening, quite literally, experience. We met Druids, we met Amazonians, we met BBC personalities, we met general folk, common folk from the UK and far and wide, and we were able to really engage with so many different personalities. It was a miracle to behold in many ways, and more than we could have perhaps hoped for. And so we look forward to getting back to base and seeing what really we have managed to capture on this unfolding adventure.
So on reflection, we are greatly delighted with the overall experience, the encounters we have had, and the material gathered from the interviews. One thought above all remains extremely clear. DMT is definitely not a drug nor an intoxicant, and it is a great injustice to associate it with destructive and super addictive drugs that cause degenerative harm to our body, mind, and soul. Yet the opposite is true with naturally occurring entheogen or psychoactive plants. Most of the people point to the fact that they should be ingested in an appropriate space and with the right intention. The following fact remains nevertheless true. Today, researchers in neuroscience, doctors, psychotherapists, guardians of ancestral knowledge, and hundreds of thousands of people having tried it vouch for the immense virtues and benefits of this spirit molecule. This is whether purely DMT, or in its form of ayahuasca, or structurally similar, like in psilocybin or MIO5 DMT. DMT and structurally similar psychedelics appear to be literally a gift from God to humanity, to heal us and to get closer to Him, and therefore should be considered as entheogens in the most literal and original sense of the meaning, from the Greek, which generates the God within. Now, a disturbing question is why there is so much taboo, misinformation, control, and prohibition about it from our governments and media organizations. Why do most of the drugs sold by the big pharmaceutical companies that supposedly tackle depression, anxiety, PTSD have so many horrific side effects, so little efficiency, and have not an ounce of the benefits of DMT, yet are widely prescribed, sold, and promoted? On this critical question, we tend to agree strongly with specialist Terence McKenna, who said about psychedelics, they are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong. There is evidently then a war on drugs, but more importantly, it seems to our horror today that there is in tandem a war on consciousness, as Graham Hancock has clearly stated fearlessly for years already.
It seems to me that if we are not sovereign over our own consciousness, then we can't meaningfully claim to be sovereign over anything. It's useless, a complete waste of time to indulge ourselves in all sorts of self-congratulation about how free we are, about how our democracies are a model of freedom, when we're prepared to send people to prison for exploring that most intimate, that most precious, that most sapient part of themselves, which is their own consciousness. I feel that the war on drugs, the persecution of individuals for exploring their own consciousness with drugs, has set in motion a huge reverse in the true direction of Western history, pushed us away from the quest for individual freedom, and pushed us into a place where we are empowering the state to control the most personal aspect of our lives. And I don't think that can be good. I feel that it's a negative historical trend. And I feel that we need to wake up and do something about this.
So what about religion in all of this? Was it not the original role of religion to help and guide humanity, to offer a link and a spiritual doorway towards the divine presence? Shamanism, druidism, ancient Greek mystery schools and other Gnostic circles all ingested and still use DMT or other psychedelic substances in their ceremonies. But none of this movement represents religion today. None of them call to the supremacy of the one true God, or clearly claim to be part of the one religion of God, nor tie themselves to names like Moses, Jesus, or Muhammad. Why are entheogens, the likes of DMT, not part of the mainstream religion today? Why are such beneficial and precious substances not spoken about in religion and part of the official ceremonial sacraments? In The Goal of the Wise, Abba al-Sadiq insinuates that indeed psychedelics are part of religion by revealing that its use and knowledge about it was known only by the prophets and righteous ones and whoever God willed that they know, who researched the matter concerning the Abrahamic faith to see if there is some knowledge out there that we are not aware of. We came across a very interesting character in Reverend Danny Nemu, a historian of religion and sacred rites in the Abrahamic faith. He is an author of Neuroapocalypse, who is featured on Ancient Origins, and we met with him for a conversation about psychoactive plants in the Abrahamic customs. So I'm with Danny Nemu, Reverend Danny Nemu, shall I say, a hypnotist, researcher, author of Science Revealed, Neuroapocalypse, contributor to Reality Sandwich, and more significantly from our side of things, the Journal of Psychedelic Studies, Getting High with the High. Have you yourself found evidence of DMT-based substances in the ancient scriptures, and is any that you want to signal out for us on that basis?
So in the Bible, there's a reference to shittim, which is what the tabernacle is made of. It's constructed from one of the acacias, and it's the highest concentration of DMT in the region. And it's described over, I think, 5 chapters in immaculate detail exactly how the tabernacle is constructed. There's also reports in ancient Jewish texts about acacias being planted near graves as well, or planted on graves. So that position of the acacia at the edge of at the edge of death, at the edge of a zone which is different to this one, is also quite interesting, I find. One of the things that is not said is that the acacia was used in some fashion, either as a fumigant or ingested. Although, having said that, there's a lot that's been taken out of the Bible, and there's a lot that's been put into the Bible. So it doesn't mean to say that there never was that kind of tradition in the amongst the Israelites, but I haven't found any textual evidence anyway of DMT being consumed from the Bible.
The acacia being used in that fashion opens up to the possibility that psychoactive substances are not only active when ingested, but could have an influence in other ways on our body-mind, as it is, for example, in the case of the anointing and the fumigation.
The place in which the most, let's say, psychoactives were consumed is the tabernacle. And when the priests go into the tabernacle, they are initially anointed with an oil. It's the anointing oil. This is from Exodus, and thou shalt anoint Aaron and his sons and consecrate them, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. So in order to have an experience of the Israelite God, the anointing oil has to be used. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon David from that day forward. That's the first book of Samuel. The only people who were allowed to be anointed with the oil are two classes of people. One was the priests and one was the king himself. And both of those positions are a connection between the divine and the tribe.
So we have here the use of an oil reserved to a spiritual elite, representing or transmitting the word of God to the people. So did this oil contain some psychoactive agent?
There seems to be very good evidence that the 4 ingredients in the anointing oil, in the shemen hamishcha, are myrrh, cinnamon, cassia, and canebasem. The myrrh inside, which is part of the mixture, is psychoactive on its own, and if you eat myrrh, you'll notice. The other ingredient in the oil there is canebasem, and all of the evidence points to the fact that it is cannabis. So the first stage of this process is the inhibition, the use of the oil, which contains myrrh, cannabis, and these 2 enzyme inhibitors. But then there's another stage of the whole process, which is where the high priest goes alone into the Holy of Holies, and all he takes in there is a censer, and all that is in there is the holy box. And he would sit there. Well, the first thing he would do is take handfuls of incense and burn these handfuls of incense in this 4.5 meter tightly sealed hot box, basically. And the 16 ingredients in that mixture for a start, they're finely ground. And a second thing is that 12 of them are psychoactive. And that's things like frankincense, spikenard, agar wood is in there, labdaman is in there, galbanum is in there. And all of these incenses have effects on our GABA system, for example, the opioid system, and they boost various neurotransmitters. So when he would come out with some information, and this is what psychedelics were used for certainly in the Israelite tradition, and actually in a lot of traditions. You see it in the Greek tradition as well. People would go, and you see it with shamanism, for example, in the Amazon.
It seemed like these elected priests were able to use this psychoactive substance and to kind of divine what they should be doing for critical points in the tribe's journey.
It's often about war divination, which is also the case in Amazonian tribes, for example. And in fact, a lot of the astrologers or the mystics of ancient times, one of the main things they had to do was to protect, the main thing they had to do was to protect the tribe from the various threats that there were. So war is one of those. So, for example, Moses will come out of the tabernacle and he will decide that it's time to move the camp, or he'll decide that it's time to attack, or it's not time to attack. They will also find things that they need for their survival. So, for example, finding water or something like that.
So we find here, in the Abrahamic tradition, the same concept. and practices extremely similar to what was happening in ancient Greece and is still happening in shamanism today. The psychoactive substances are reserved for a spiritual elite that guides and plays the role of a gateway, a link between God and the people. So this answers our first interrogation about the existence of psychedelics in the monotheistic religion. Now, we wonder if there were some traces in the scriptures of some ceremonial sacraments or spiritual practices open to a public at large, to the common believers.
There are two things that the Israelites are given when they're in the wilderness, and one of them is manna and one of them is quails. And the manna is the one that's exalted. There's a line which says, for example, "At evening you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be satisfied with bread," which is manna, "and you shall know that I am Yahweh your God." So that word "satisfy" is the same Hebrew word which is used to describe the effect of oil and incense elsewhere. So we're not necessarily talking about the satisfaction of food, and in fact the satisfaction of the food, which is the quails, is not considered quite so interesting as the satisfaction of manna. So manna is given to all of the Israelites at once, and one of the very interesting things about it is that the only time when all of the tribe together have a collective vision is when they're all drinking or when they're all eating manna together. And the vision is described like this: "And all the people are seeing the voices and the flames and the sound of the trumpet." And we don't normally see voices, and we don't normally see the sounds of the trumpet. That's what's described as synesthesia, which is when the senses mix. It quite often happens when you're tripping, for example, but it doesn't normally happen when you're not on some kind of psychoactive. It certainly doesn't happen to an entire tribe at the same time. And we tend to think of this as bread of heaven. We think of it dropping like food aid or something like that. But I think it makes much more sense to think that rather it coming from heaven, it takes us up to heaven.
Now, if Danny admits it is only speculation, it does indeed make sense that the manna, being ergot or otherwise, would contain some psychoactive element. And this would not be too far-fetched, knowing that even in Islam, there is a mention of a well-known psychoactive plant advised by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself.
Yeah, so harmal is the word there, which is peganum harmala, which is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. It's related to the word haram, which means two things. It means taboo, but it also means sacred, cherem. So the Great Mosque has that word in its title. Harmal is described in one of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. It expels devils and averts misfortune. And there's a really interesting hadith which talks about, well, I'll quote it here: "Whoever takes 4.25 grams of harmal in water for 40 mornings each day, so shall wisdom enlighten his heart, and he shall be healed, immune from 72 diseases." So there we've got two of the things that an ayahuasca analog might do. And bear in mind that the word harmal is where we get the word harmaline from as well. So it's this harmaline is let's say the active ingredient in the ayahuasca vine, which is also found in Peganum harmala. So what we got there is both the curing of disease and also the inspiration.
It is interesting to find again this double function of the psychedelic, the healing and the portal to a divine connection. Something that came up a lot throughout almost all of our interviews, and something actually expressed too in The Goal of the Wise, in the holy words of Ahmad al-Hassan. Now there is a question we cannot help but ask ourselves. If the theory of manna being a psychedelic given to a whole crowd of believers on so many occasions is true, And if the Holy Prophet himself advised in the consumption of Syrian rue, which is clearly an entheogenic plant, then how and why did it disappear from the mainstream teachings and the practice of the monotheistic religions altogether? As a last question, we asked Danny his opinion on the matter.
That manna, which was available during the time of the wilderness and potentially for a long time afterwards, who knows, became haram, became something that was to be kept away from the general masses. And it may be the case that the anointing oil and the fumigants, the Ketoret Hasamim, which is the incense, and all of these things became forbidden at a later point in history. Because if you look at the code, the rules of what's forbidden and what's allowed, there are no plants that are forbidden in the Bible. So there's no drugs which are not kosher in the Bible. But the Bible's really clear. It says he gives grass for the cattle and herbs for the service of man.
Because we don't hear about it a lot, do we? In the Abrahamic faith, we don't hear a lot about people talking about introducing psychedelics into the religious experience.
Well, you don't. I mean, you do now because psychedelics are super trendy. So you've got like whole loads of priests and rabbis who are getting interested, and including, I believe, some imams as well.
But it still seems on the fringes a little bit, from my experience.
Yeah, if you look in medieval Jewish books, for example, there's references to cannabis. So I think if they are excluded, it's a new thing. I don't think that there was a particular drive in early Christianity to stamp out mushroom cults or anything like that. I think more likely is in the age of the Enlightenment, when we began to exalt normality and normalness and ordinary experience over other forms of revelation, let's say. So the scientific method became the way that you were to understand things, and revelation wasn't the way that you meant to understand things anymore, or learn things anymore.
I know that when we talk about this Paul, who's mentioned in the Bible, he seems to have a different perspective and talks more about, could you say, empire building, and seems to drive away the spiritual journey. Do you think that was a sign that they were trying to implant that testament in the Bible to drive people away from their own divine experience with the spirit molecule?
I would say so, yes. Paul explicitly mentions pharmakon, and in modern Bibles, that's translated as witchcraft. So, yeah, Paul is complicated. There are Gnostic ways of looking at Paul, but certainly the way that Paul is used by the Church Fathers, his words were used to construct a church which was much more formal, much more in line with empire, which was much more cool with keeping slaves and so on and so forth. So yes, I would say that's probably right.
Our interview with Danny continued, and we explored many other different landscapes in a rich and enlightening exchange. We are very grateful for his time and enthusiasm to answer our questions and help us better understand the subject of our research. To come back to Paul, he indeed caused a lot of damage to the original religion and teachings of Jesus Christ. But he hasn't been alone in that evil enterprise. Surely the Council of Nicaea and the centuries of Inquisition participated in that as well, with their witch hunt and their condemnation of everything connected to divine knowledge that would challenge their narrow-minded evil canvas. All of it, without a shadow of a doubt, played a role in conforming the religion to the empty and barren dogma and religious teachings of the Church that we know today. Now, Now, did Jesus and his companions consume DMT-based substances or other psychedelics? Was it part of his teachings? No readings nor interviews we undertook could bring any meaningful evidence nor serious answer to this question. So obviously the question still remains open. But if Moses and Prophet Muhammad seem to have partaken in it, so why not Jesus as well? As for Islam, nothing is taught in that way in the mosque nor in the Quran. The Sunni majority most generally classify DMT and psychedelics as intoxicants and therefore haram. And if there is some sect in Shia Islam and a few Sufi groups that allow it, psychedelics and DMT-based substances are clearly not part of the religious practice and teaching of the lost and degenerative Islam of today. The veil has begun to open. The use of psychedelics has most probably always been part of the journey between humanity and God. But the religion being usurped by tyrannical and evil, power-hungry hypocrites, it has disappeared from the general teachings and from the Holy Scriptures. In addition to that, it might have been the case, as it had been with alcohol in Islam, that entheogenic plants were at some point allowed, but because of their misuse by the believers, they became prohibited to the general public, and therefore kept as a secret practice for the prophets and the closest of their companions. We are now reaching the end of our journey, and if we could go on researching and learning more about it, we would do. However, we have come to a point where, at least theoretically, it is very clear. Psychedelics, after hundreds of years of repression and prohibition imposed by our governments and religions, have come to a renaissance today. The myth of taking it being blasphemous or provoking sudden insanity to the point where individuals would want to jump out from the window start to dissipate as more and more religious and spiritual groups or even individuals integrate it into their time of communion with God. Celebrities like Mike Tyson, Sting, or Joe Rogan testified to the safety, sacredness, and goodness, along with some courageous political figures, the likes of the MP in the UK, Charlotte Nichols, pushing for the rescheduling of psilocybin in this country, whilst Portugal and the Netherlands and some states in America have not legalized it but decriminalized it under certain conditions. A movement is in progress. Even if restrictions are still many, DMT-based substances are subject to much research and integration into the field of psychiatry and medicine. As for the mainstream religions, it is very apparent that religion became a failure for helping people, an archetype of tyranny and control, backwardness and prohibition, guilt and the fear generator. But is that the whole of religion today, the only remnant that remains? Or is it just what religion and all organizations and societies become when corrupted by the darkness of a selfish mind? What if there was another narrative, with a religion, the true religion, kept silent and secret all of these years, like a thin, unbroken thread, like a reed surrounded by big, powerful trees, discreet and humble, veiled, waiting for the time when all the stiff trees would have collapsed as prophesied and foretold. The true religion of God is at the service of humanity and has always been. God is free. God loves freedom. God is just and loves justice. God is life. God is love. And there is no life without love. We are the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, and we have with us the man that all religions await, the man that comes to reveal all the letters of knowledge, the man that will bring justice and equity as much as there is injustice and corruption in the land. And that man today is revealing many secrets and truths about God and his religion here on this channel, but also in his book, The Goal of the Wise. One of these revelations concerns the light and darkness. And he disclosed that many substances understood as intoxicants or considered haram and not allowed by God are actually filled with light, and are here as our ally in our journey to recollect memories of our true nature and origin, to remember who we are and what or who is God. DMT is not an intoxicant, and the opposite is true. It is a connecting substance present in all creatures, filled with light, and a portal and a vehicle to enter other worlds and dimensions, an opening to the divine realm beyond this world and what we would consider ourselves to be.